Greetings, foolish mortals. It's the VO Wizard, and today I've cooked up an interesting campaign idea in the forest. Welcome to the tower. Now, everybody loves new creative ideas to throw at their players, but sometimes you can get caught in a creative loop. D&D is a complex game with a lot of moving parts, and when you've invented all of it, you've had to create everything, and now you have to keep track. Sometimes it's nice to get a little free inspiration, a town, a setting, an accent, maybe a new character. And God forbid you ever get dungeon block one week. That's what I'm here for. I love coming up with new ideas, and then seeing how creatively you can slap them inside your own world. That being said, let's see what you think of some of these. Magic! The idea here is for your PCs to either wander into or maybe be imprisoned and captured and taken into a camp inside of the forest. What you see is quite a large area of forest playfully populated by tents and other structures, not having cleared the nature, but built around it. Well built and established as though it's been here for quite some time. Some tents are open as public areas, and some are closed for residents, all made of thick, very durable material. Some structures are more house-like, made expertly of wood and decorated to fit in with the forest. Each roof is adorned and possibly disguised with moss, depending on how you want to look at it. Moss covers the ground surrounding, and it also kind of gets up onto the walls. Some houses are even built up into the branches of the imposing trees of the forest, many of which have no roofing and open straight into the canopy. Hammocks and bags are slung plentifully, and fires dance in close proximities to each other on the mossless clearings between the tents and buildings. The massive trees of the forest possess such humongous roots and thick branches that the inhabitants have built onto and into the trees easily. The colossal canopy towers easily over 100 feet above, and the light which filters through from so high up dapples the ground such that the leaves and moss, which might have only been brown and green, display instead a multitude of shades. The mixed lighting here may also affect the player's eyes, hair, clothing, and any other feature you find interesting. You may also take this opportunity to stress, especially to your players, that the light is different here and how the light is different here in case they have items or maybe equipment that could be activated by it. A large pool is constantly filled by a small waterfall and empties itself into a large stream away from camp. The running water that forms the waterfall from above is a fresh water source, which serves for drinking, laundering, and general water use. Bathing could happen where the pool empties into the stream, and there might optionally be a little cave behind the waterfall in case you need one for the camp leader's house, a loot stash, etc. What you smell, obviously, here is always the scent of camp, burning kindling, leaves, brush, and cooking meat. If you have some kind of scented candle that smells like a campfire, or maybe pine trees, or maybe both, this would be the perfect place to use it. However civilized you choose to make this encampment, or whatever you put here, will determine the quality of the meat and the food they prepare, and how appetizing or not it smells to your players. Although there is a freshwater source for bathing, you can decide if the players can smell the filth from the inhabitants of the camp, and whether or not they're cleverly disposing of their waste. This will once again depend on the degree of civility that you decide upon, but for this one, I'll choose decency and hygiene over indifference and smelly neglect. Also, please tell me you don't have a scented candle for that. You may also optionally add flora and the smell of what special flowers or fruit grow here, and there is always the opportunity to describe mystery scent and have your PCs track it like bloodhounds to wherever you need them to go. What you hear is the crackling of the all too frequent campfires throughout the generous grounds. The sound might bring the feeling of warmth, food, and safety, or depending on what you want from this camp, you might be marching your players imprisoned past the fires, which may signal a very volatile NPC coming up, and maybe a potentially dangerous fate. A possible sound in the forest is always the wildlife. Birdsong, the occasional rustling of bushes with squirrels, wild boars, deer. The trickling of water and rush of the waterfall is always present, and the leaves rustling from what wind is able to find its way through the canopy. One thing I often like to incorporate into forest sequences is a message system sent by whistling arrows. Depending on how dense the forest, My favorite method of communication from camp dwellers is arrows with metal cones near the tip, so that the space between the cone and the arrow tip will fill with air and scream as it soars. You can play with either color-coded message, or you can do what I like to do and use the differing pitch of each arrow howl to denote things like danger, potential target, hunt, loot, wanderer, returning band members, and things like that. So, for the optional complication, I've had this lingering idea in my head all week long, and it's a bit wild, but I'm gonna let you decide. In the forest, loud cracks, bangs, and thumps can be heard intermittently and at varying distances. This can be a problem for the camp. If they're friendly to your players, they could offer them information or reward to investigate and cease the ominous noises. If they're unfriendly, maybe they still fear the noises and leave your PCs tied up or restrained and abandoned near where they think the noise comes from. However it plays out, my odd little idea is that a Goliath College of Percussion bard is jumping through the forest, making noise on nature for his studies. He wants to know what sound hitting a giant mushroom spore would make and things like that. You could give him a sympathetic background, like he was unwelcome to do his thesis on percussion with the other students as his Goliath nature puts them off. Or you could somehow make him malicious if you like. Perhaps he was civilized and has gone feral somehow. High points in acrobatics, dexterity, and wielding 2 giant cudgels for beating on things. Likely heavier than most normal-sized creatures could lift. The forest is a world of fun, especially when you can spice it up with something that usually doesn't belong in the forest. I hope you liked hearing all of this as much as I liked coming up with it, and as always, feel free to keep any or all of this for your story. This is always just to enhance and expand your own original ideas. Scroll down to the comments section and let me know what you're thinking of that Goliath idea. And then while you're there, tell me where this all fits inside of your world. Toll the bell on the subscribe button to get reminded when these videos release, and remember, if you want to see some cheap tricks, you can go watch anybody. But if you want to know some real magic, you come watch the wizard.